I don't know how many of you have been with us. I know some of you are here here tonight that are not normally with us on a Wednesday night for our summer series. We're just going to be a few minutes, by the way. Y'all don't have to take the kids, but they're ready to go. Okay. I don't know how many of you have been a part of this, but I would have to agree with what Steve has said a number of times throughout the summer, that this has been one of the best summer series that I've seen or been a part of. And I've put these together for 20-something years, I guess, between here and down in Lakeland. So did you have a favorite? Oh, you didn't have to answer. This is kind of... And if you did have a favorite, I wonder, why was that favorite? And did you have one that, do you have a favorite preacher to listen to? Well, I think, like I said, I think Steve's been right on this, that it's really been good. I would say the last week and this week, you just really hit the skids between Wayne and myself being the last two. So it's just a situation where all except two of the men addressed the verses that they were supposed to address. Two of the men did not. I won't tell you who they were. I'll let you figure that out. But they did what they were asked to do, which is really an amazing thing in and of itself. I can just tell you from putting these together, the guys, I think they take what they preached the previous Sunday, they retitle it what I told them to title it, and then they come and preach sometimes. But what I just want to look at this evening in closing is the last couple of verses in chapter 7. Chapter 7 of the book of Matthew, it says, "And so it was that when Jesus ended these sayings, that the people were astonished at his teaching. For he taught them as one who had authority and not as one of the scribes." Why were they so amazed? The word amazed here, this Greek word amazed, it means to strike away with a blow. We might say today that he got the pins knocked out from under him or whatever, something along that line. They were so shocked. They were so knocked off of their feet by hearing this message of Jesus. It says, because he taught them as one having authority and not as the scribe. So the first thing that I would suggest to you tonight, just quickly, is he taught differently than all of the other teachers did of his day. If we look at the court system today, our court system today, that many of the trials, many of the laws, whatever, are based on previous law, and it'll be quoted, previous law. So-and-so in this particular case, this particular situation. And we see that happening, and that's how their teaching was very similar to that, quoting previous. Or you go into academia and you listen to somebody who is an expert in academia, and the way that they prove that they're an expert is because they quote and cite 20, 30, 50 other people who bolster their kind of idea. But Jesus was not like that. The Sermon on the Mount, Jesus doesn't quote other rabbis. He doesn't say, that was the teaching of the day. That was the way it was done. Jesus doesn't say, Rabbi Hillel says thus and so, and then give his confirmation to his point. What Jesus actually does is he says, he didn't quote others, in fact, he said, you have heard it said before, but I say unto you, very authoritatively when he gave his word. You have heard that it said before, but I say unto you, or chapter 7, verses 24 and 26, these sayings of mine that Jesus was teaching them. And then look at chapter 13 of the book of Matthew. Matthew chapter 13, verse 54. Well, if I can get there. Verse 54, really verse 53. When Jesus had finished telling these stories and illustrations, he left that part of the country and he returned to Nazareth, his hometown. And when he taught there in the synagogue, everyone was amazed and said, where does he get this wisdom and the power to do these miracles? Then they scoffed. He says, he's just the carpenter's son. And we know Mary, his mother, and his brothers, James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas, and all of his sisters live right here among us. Where did he learn these things? That they were offended by Jesus. His teaching was so different. It was so unique, so strange in the way that he did this. But here's what I want you to think about. And I realize the familiarity that we have, many of us have, with the Sermon on the Mount, it makes it very difficult for us to see this. But I want you to picture with me, this is a young man. He's about 30 years old. Jeffrey, how old are you? Huh? 31. Okay, so he's Jeffrey, who's not well known in this group yet. And Jesus was not well known in the area. And Jesus comes up in front. He's got a small band of men who are following him, a small band of disciples. And now there's a large crowd that has gathered around him as well. But here he is. He's a relative unknown. He's a young man of about 30 or so years old. He doesn't come from any special stock as far as they can tell. He doesn't have any pedigree. He's not a Pharisee. He's not a scribe. Jesus comes. He's a carpenter's son. He's from the city of Nazareth. You know that Nazareth is not even mentioned in the Old Testament? That's how small and insignificant the city is. He comes from Nazareth. You remember what was said? Oh, can anything good come out of Nazareth? I mean, this cannot be. This man, Jesus, he stands before them, no pedigree, no particular social standing, suddenly bursts on the scene, and he begins teaching. And he teaches what we've just gone through in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. And when he's done, the people are astonished. They are absolutely amazed at this one. But the third thing I want you to see from this, and that's so important, is that Jesus claimed divine status even in the Sermon on the Mount, right out of the gate. Chapter 5 and verse 11, he says that if you're persecuted for my sake, what do you mean for your sake? You 30-year-old unknown who's standing in front of us for the first time and we're listening to you? How do you have this kind of authority? He says in chapter 5 and verse 17, I didn't come to destroy the law, but to fulfill it. Who do you think you are? Must have been the thoughts of some as they listened to Jesus. In chapter 6 and verse 2 and verse 5 and verse 16 and verse 25, he says, assuredly I say unto you, this is how it ought to be. I'm telling you, this is what it is. Chapter 7, verses 21 and 22, that you can call me Lord, Lord, the master, the ruler. They had to do what he said, or he tells them they're going to be punished. You're going to be punished? You're going to suffer if you don't do what he says? This 30-something-year-old, unknown carpenter's son with no pedigree? We know him. In fact, that was the thought. Hey, we know this guy. We know his brothers. We know his sisters. This is the carpenter's son. Nazareth was so small, there was probably only one or two carpenters in the town. They knew who Jesus was. This ordinary young man, this carpenter's son, with no special training, tells the people, you'll be persecuted if you don't do, or if you do what I tell you to do, but if you don't, you're going to be punished. He also said to the people, you'll call me Lord. I mean, it's just, I get this, that maybe you've not thought in these ways before, but it's almost unimaginable to try to consider what happened that day as Jesus sat on that mountaintop and talked to those people. So here's my point. It's the only thing that I really want to leave with you tonight. First of all, I didn't know how long I'd have. I told them 5 minutes or 30 minutes, and they said, yep, that's exactly right. And so we didn't know tonight. But here's my point in all of this, and I really think it's the point of Jesus' sermon, and this is what we shouldn't ever lose. It's not did you have a favorite sermon or a favorite preacher that came. What we should be impressed with more than anything else is the preacher himself. When Jesus was done with the sermon, they were amazed, not at all, not what he said, although he did say a lot of things that were amazing, but they were amazed at him. And that's where our focus needs to be. You know that preachers, good preaching is usually emphasized today. Don't leave the messenger behind, but you want to leave the message. Jesus was different, though. Jesus wanted to leave the message, but he also wanted to leave the messenger behind, himself. I'm the one, Jesus was saying. I'm the reason. I'm here. I'm Messiah. I'm the one where it all comes back to. And there's no way to separate the man from the message. They're tied together. Jesus spoke these things because he was God in the flesh. And as he spoke these things, we should listen to them and we should obey them because of who he is. Not because, wow, that was a great sermon. Wow, that was a great message that he left. But, wow, that was the Son of God who said these things. So, some have tried to make a distinction between a message. They've said that the Sermon on the Mount is nothing more than just social reform. I don't know what one they're reading. There's a lot more than social reform. There is spiritual inventory that happens in the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus was amazing. What he said was amazing, but he was amazing. He is amazing because he's God's Son. He's the Redeemer and Savior of the world. I don't know where you are in your walk, but I do know that God offers to you a chance. Jesus says, "Come unto me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, I'll give you rest." You will? You will, Jesus? Yeah, he will. Not because he's the carpenter's son, but because he's God's son. And that he offers that to you, and he offers that to me, and he offers that to all mankind. If we could help you tonight to become a Christian, it'd be a thrill for us to do so. Or if you need to come back or want to come back and ask for the prayers of this group and this family to stand by you and with you, it would be an honor for us to do that as well. Let us know while we stand, and we'll sing this song.